Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information and no conspiracy theories. I'm going to be here every Thursday, 12 till 2 a.m, the night shift on People's Internet Radio. Many people may know that I was on the People's Voice television station until that folded, and I've carried on doing consistent work as best as I can. And tonight we've got a very interesting show for you. My first guest is Christina England, a journalist who's looking into vaccination scandals. She's been doing this for many years, and she's just put together a new book with Dr. Luciva Tomjanovic. I hope I've actually said that right.
Really?
Is that okay, Christina? Just jump in there.
Lucia Tomjanovic.
Yes, yours was a slightly more fluid than mine there. But I'm just going to read out the introduction to the book, which you've been co-writing with her, and it's called Vaccination Policy in the UK Government, The Untold Truth. Now, this quote is from Anna Victoria Rogers, and she wrote a book called Toxic World, Toxic People, and another one called Simply the Best. She says, this book has all the intrigue and drama associated with an Agatha Christie crime novel, keeping you up at night and gripping you onto the edge of your seat. However, as soon as you realise that it is not a work of fiction, you will become deeply enraged. Vaccination Policy and the UK Government, The Untold Truth, has been meticulously researched by two of the world's leading experts on vaccines by using the UK Government's own documents. Dr. Luciva Tomjanovic and Christina England have demonstrated just how far the government and the medical profession are prepared to go in their effort to cover up vaccine injuries, prepared to be shocked, outraged, and above all, truly disgusted. Quite a strong opener, that, Christine. So welcome to Windows on the World.
Hello, Mark, and thank you for having me. Yes, it was a strong intro. Anna's was one of 4 endorsements that was in our book, and she's truly a remarkable person.
Yes, I've had you on the show several times, and your research into what can only be described as the vaccination scandal is quite deep, varied and very wide. For people who haven't come across you before, can you just give a little introduction into how you got into this field and your background?
Yes, I've got 2 children, Daniel and Nicholas. They're both disabled children. I adopted them both, and they were both vaccinated before I had them. I uniquely got accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy due to one of them being vaccine damage, or I believe it's one of them being vaccine damage. He has vaccine damage in his medical records, and this was highlighted by Lisa Blakemore-Brown, a psychologist that came on board in our case to help us, and I believe it's only through her efforts that I managed to keep my children. And that's how I got into it all. I decided to start researching what she was saying and seeing how true she was. After getting to know Lisa over many years, the more I learned, the more she told me, the more I learned about it all. I thought, well, if either this woman is start raving mad, or there's something to it, and she's telling the truth. If she's telling the truth, then this is absolutely incredible. And I found out that she is telling the truth, and she is one hell of a lady.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of revelations in this book, and it's a very, very interesting read. It also includes your experiences on being accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. For people who don't know what that is, could you just explain it?
Yes, it's just where a parent or caregiver makes up or exaggerates illness and disabilities to get attention from the medical profession. And it's a form of child abuse. And basically, the book is written in 2 halves. And my first half with 4 chapters. Lucia wrote 8 chapters, but her chapters are a lot shorter. And we both used the medical, the government JCVI, which is the equivalent of the CDC, who sanction our vaccinations. We used their papers and the minutes of their meetings, and we were both using the same and working on the same papers at the same time, and we came together after meeting at a conference and decided that, seeing we were working on the same papers and we were using different angles, that we should work together. My half is actually included. It's really about Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I discuss how the label came about, the professionals behind the label, and what the label means for families with vaccine-damaged children, and the vaccination policies and the corruption that goes on behind government and behind closed doors that we don't get a chance to see. And we do believe it is corruption, but it's our opinions and our beliefs. This is an educational and information book only. We're not dictating. It's entirely up to you if you vaccinate your children. Educate yourself before you vaccinate. That's all we ask.
Yes, it's worth looking at the bigger picture with this, and we've talked about how these vaccine programs are implemented, and that in itself should tell people quite a lot about what it's really about. We've talked about Gavi and these UN programs. So as far as your investigations go, which vaccines have you been really focusing on?
Well, all of the vaccines actually, but mainly the MMR, and we were looking into the Plusrex, the history of Plusrex, which was the first MMR that was brought in 1988 and taken out in 1992. It was never banned in the UK, although it was banned in Canada and Japan before it was brought into the UK. They changed the name and they advertised the vaccine without the black triangle, which if a new vaccine or a new drug comes onto the market, they are supposed to, or they're advised to, advertise it with a black triangle so that doctors are aware that it's a new drug being tried. They didn't do this. They brought it in, changed the name, and they began using it. And the interesting thing about this is that during the years that the Plusrex was around, this is all my part of the book is about. Really, it's about a guy called Professor Roy Meadow, Sir Roy Meadow, and he was the first one to ever introduce the label Munchausen syndrome by proxy. There are rumours of other people that have actually introduced the label, but he was the first one, and he introduced the label regarding a salt case, salt poisoning. He reckoned that his mother had been feeding this child salt. He was working in a clinic, and this child was kept being brought in. The child was quite ill, and they found that the child had an over amount of sodium in his blood. And when they examined him closely, they seemed to believe that from the paper, and it's called Hinterlands of Child Abuse, it is freely available on the internet, and I write quite extensively on this paper. They actually state that it was very difficult to feed. They believed it was very difficult to feed a child salt, and they go into exactly how they believed that the child would be fed salt by the mother, and how much salt would be a dangerous amount to give a child. So to see if it could be done or not, they feed this poor little boy 20 grams of salt. The actual team to feed him this 20 grams of salt, and the child died, during the treatments and everything else. Now we don't know if the actual doctors killed the child, or if the mother killed the child, or if it was a combination of both. But the child did die. But this was what the Munchausen syndrome label was based on, and she got accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The interesting thing is that during this paper, they never seemed to discuss any other disability or disorder that may have an overdose of salt in the blood. And there is one called diabetes insipidus, and they didn't discuss this, although there were papers dating back from 1927 on diabetes insipidus. And I did wonder and question in my book why it was that they didn't discuss other disorders and perhaps diabetes insipidus. Now Sir Roy Meadow went on to write another paper called Salt Poisoning, and this paper was used in many court cases. I highlight a particular court case that I knew of, and actually I was involved in, that used this paper. I wasn't involved into it until later, when this child, which was another foster child, funny enough, a child that was going to be adopted, the 4 children were being adopted, and it was the parents' uncle that got hold of me because both parents were jailed on this salt poisoning paper. Now, when you read into the paper, Professor Roy Meadow actually self-referenced himself. He speaks about this paper that was written in 1977. What he doesn't say is that he wrote the paper. So it's all based on questionable research, and that's the word we use in the book. It's questionable research. Then in 1987, he pops up in the JCV meetings to advise the government on vaccinations and vaccination policies. Now, the only thing that I found odd about that, because obviously he is a doctor, he is quite, it's quite normal for doctors to change and for different doctors to come in and out these meetings, but he only was used from 1987 to 1991, and Plusvax, which was this dangerous vaccine that they knew was dangerous, they knew it was causing a lot of problems, a lot of side effects, was only brought into the UK in 1988 and moved out of the UK in 1992. So during the years when this vaccine was being used the most, Professor Meadow, Roy Meadow, was advising the government and was speaking up in the vaccine meetings. Now I've got all of the papers where he spoke out in the meeting, and he also, it turns out, he was actually had conflicts of interest, and we've got all those stricken out as well. He's involved with vaccine, pharmaceutical industry, and an echo. Can you stop that, please? Can you stop the echo at all?
I don't know, we might be losing you a little bit, but just get nearer to the microphone and carry on. We can still hear you.
Okay. Yes, that's better. Yes, he's got conflicts of interest, and so had most of the other doctors that were on the panels, and I've actually listed them. I've actually shown where the conflicts of interest are. I've highlighted all the papers. These are all freedom of information papers. We're not doing anything wrong. We also go into great detail, to both of us, the Gulf War syndrome and how all these meetings seem to be connected with the Gulf War syndrome and the Gulf War veterans having these vaccines. Plusvax was actually used. Now, when it was taken out of the UK in 1992, it was discontinued. It wasn't banned. And in doing this, they kept the UK licence, and in keeping the UK licence, this gave the green light for it to be sold to UNICEF. And I go into great detail about UNICEF, and I find out that the Irish government is giving UNICEF a lot of money. Now, this vaccine was taken over to the... it's a very interesting story, and it does go on. It's actually the vaccine was taken over to Yugoslavia and in Africa at the time. And we see it being used in Brazil as well. And this brings another professional that's all involved in the Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and his involvement in the vaccine issues. And he's one that was really accusing many parents, and one that was very, very well known in the country. Now, both these doctors, one was knighted, and that was Dr. Roy Meadow. He's now Sir Roy Meadow. He was knighted for his child protection work. And this seems to highlight over children that had vaccine damage. And more children with vaccine damage, the parent or caregiver of that child was falsely accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And I speak in great detail about Lisa Blakemore Brown's papers. I speak in detail about her work and what she was trying to do and what she was trying to get out, and how she was destroyed in her efforts and destroyed as a professional, and really how she tried to highlight the issues and what was going on and the work surrounding these two professionals. Now, this was Sir Roy Meadow and David Southall, both very highly involved in the Munchausen syndrome by proxy label. And then I go on to highlight my own case in great detail. I put my own papers as appendix in the book. But I also speak in great detail about the Gulf War syndrome, because of the fact that this vaccine was used on the Gulf War veterans. And I also find out all the other vaccines that were used. I highlight these, the combinations of vaccines that we use. These soldiers were having 15, 16 vaccines in one day. These were a lot of vaccines. They were also being given NAPs, which are the nerve agent protection pills. They were being sprayed with chemicals. They were open to gases in the Gulf War. They were also open to fires and all sorts of things. And they were poisoned, literally. The vaccines that were being used were very many vaccines. But I've also found out through the Ministry of Defence papers and reading those that these soldiers, the actual Porton Down laboratory, I'm sure you know what that is, Mark,
Yes.
It's where they test the vaccines on and drugs on animals before they come and be tested on humans. They actually prevented I've got the paper, it's in the book, it's actually as appendix in the book. It's from the Ministry of Defence, it's a declassified paper, but it was provided on Freedom of Information. It actually states there that they decided to stop and not go ahead with the animal testing at Porton Down, to go ahead and give the soldiers these vaccines straight off. So these vaccines were not tested on animals, they were untested and potentially unsafe to use on humans. We go into this in great detail. Lucia's half was using the government papers, the same minutes from the same meetings, in different ways. She includes more papers. I use just those years in particular where Sir Loy Meadow was involved. However, she talks about all the different meetings in different years. She uses papers from 1960 right through to 2012. And these are all highlighted there on my website, Parents and Carers Against Medical Injustice. That's Parents and Carers Against Medical Injustice. All the papers are put on there. They are given to lots and lots of other people, so there's many people that now have the use of these papers and know about the papers. We did this so that if they disappeared, if our sites disappeared, they would come back up, because these are very important papers. They are for information and educational purposes only. They were provided on Freedom of Information, and we're not doing anything wrong. We're just talking about what the UK government is saying about the vaccines and how they come to make their vaccine policies, how they tend to ignore the safety of children but they want to push the vaccines for herd immunity. And this is highlighted all the way through their papers. And they ignore the safety elements, they ignore the adverse reactions that are being shown and being reported to the government, and they tend to, and it's just terrible. And what they're saying is absolutely horrendous. And this is what we're highlighting. We wanted to show up exactly what was going on behind the scenes in the government. And this is going on in all governments. It's not just the UK. Just because we're using the UK government papers doesn't mean to say that it's not happening in the US and it's not happening in Canada and Australia. Believe me, it is. We've just used our country at the moment, looking at their papers.
Well, that's very interesting, Christina, because it brings us into the bigger picture of what we were just talking about earlier on with the involvement of the UN and these mass vaccination programs, which are a worldwide thing.
Oh yes, I mean I've highlighted an awful lot about UNICEF and what was going on in UNICEF, and again it's a very questionable organisation, and they're using questionable vaccines. They're using banned and discontinued vaccines from many countries, not just the UK. Vaccines that have been banned in Japan and all sorts. They keep the licenses and they use them in other countries on the developing world. And these children are the most vulnerable children in the world. And I've shown that up in stories that I've written about Chad and India and Africa, Kenya. The vaccines are being tested on these children, and they're just being used as guinea pigs. And it's all part of what we believe, or what I believe to be, and this is not in the book, but it's what I believe to be the Agenda 21.
That comes into it massively, and
yeah.
That's something that I really cover quite a lot, as you know. And I've just been to the Paris Climate Challenge, which was the basically opposition to the COP21, which was going on in Paris at the same time, and parallels here all over the place, because we can see what the end game is here. And with the vaccination programs which you have uncovered, we spoke actually recently, I think it was the last interview we did some time ago now, actually, about this Chad vaccination scandal. I think it might be actually worth mentioning that, even though that's not in the book. It's an extremely good example of how this system operates.
Yes, the Chad scandal was where they actually locked 500 children into a school. This was really testing out a vaccine called Menacrac. And these papers and all this information came to me on email, quite unexpectedly, from a man that actually lives in Najinda. I think that's how you say it anyway. It's a big capital of Chad, and he had family in a village called Inguru, which was the village that was targeted. This was for meningitis A. It was a meningitis A vaccine. It was supposed to be able to go across the cold chain. Bill Gates brought it in. It was manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, and they decided to test it out on 500 children. They locked them into the school. They did not inform their parents. There was no consent given to this vaccine at all. They locked the children into the school. They told the children that they would not be getting any education or any kind of education at all if they refused the vaccine. Education in Africa is very, very important to children, and they would not, jeopardise their education. So they decided to go ahead, have the vaccine. 106 became ill within half an hour to an hour. They started to begin headaches, feeling sick, nauseous, not well. And 50 ended up paralysed and were taken to different hospitals in the capital. And 7 of those children were taken off in aeroplanes to Tunisia. They shut the airport down for the day. They got private planes from the WHO, and they managed to take these children to Tunisia. No one knew where they were going or what was happening. They had no visas or anything. They were taken off to into Tunisia for testing. They didn't know until they were on the plane where they were going. They had 7 of the parents with them. They had nurses and doctors, and they were tested extensively by the World Health Organization in Tunisia. And then they were just shipped back, and now they're all back in their village. They're still ill. They're not well. All the parents were given £1,000 or the equivalent of £1,000 to keep quiet. So they were given hush money. And they stated everywhere. I mean, they were furious I got the story out. I managed to get newspapers, I managed to get TV footage. All was leaked to me by this one man who was very, very brave. He even came to London and met me to give me secret documents and papers from the World Health Organization. And I explained all this on the, I think I did 5 different stories on this. On Back Truth. You can go in, you can look up Chad, you can look up my name and find out what really happened. I had to get everything translated. I had to get a translator because it was all in French. We had newspaper articles and everything. The newspapers were not on the internet, and people saying I made it all up and everything else. I couldn't make it up if I tried. We had footage of the Prime Minister of Chad, which incidentally he got... let's put it this way, he got moved out. He was moved sideways or whatever, but he literally, I would say, got the sack. And a few others because of the stuff I was leaking out. And nobody could find out how I got hold of the information. And this man just came through my website. But all the information did check out. We did check it out with the newspapers, but they weren't online because it was such a small newspaper in a small village in Africa. This was a little village where they literally they were living in huts. I got pictures of the children. They were having such terrible fits. They needed 5 adults to hold one small child down. This was a horrific story. It's just everybody knows me for the Chad story. That's how I seem to have made my name through the Chad story. But it was a terrific story to get hold of. But it was so sad. All the organisations were involved: the UN, Bill and Melinda Gates, the Serum Institute of India. Papers were changed. The sites were changed, but we had all the screenshots, so we brought it all back up again. So nothing was lost, and we compared what was said now and what was said then, and all this sort of thing. It was the CDC, PATH, Gavi, everybody that could be involved was involved in this program. So we actually showed the whole lot up on what was going on.
I think that's a really good way of linking it all together there.
Absolutely, because, it's UNICEF again, isn't it?
Yes, and the UN programs. I mean, it's very, very interesting. Sounds like you've got a bit of a sound problem there.
Have I?
Just...
Is that better?
That's a lot better. Yeah, just getting a lot of rushing noise. But I think that really polarises things, that Chad story, because it's everything that these vaccination programs are about, and it also shows how the cover-up happens and the payoffs. And Gavi, very, very important in this. Can you just tell people out there who Gavi are in case they don't know?
It's an organisation. I've never found out what Gavi actually means, but it's an organisation that's in the UK, and it's it's sort of supporting the vaccine programs, and a lot of money comes from Gavi to UNICEF. They work alongside Bill and Melinda Gates. They introduced lots of vaccines into different countries, into the developing countries. And it's an organisation that's known worldwide for what they're doing. It appears to be a very good organisation on the surface, but when you dig deeper, it's involved with all kinds of things. And our Prime Minister, actually, David Cameron, he actually, lots of money is going from the government into Gavi for these vaccination programs. They're working alongside all these organisations like PATH, UNICEF. They work alongside with them, and lots of money goes out. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds here goes into these vaccination programs. And they're using the banned and the discontinued vaccines, which I actually prove in the book. I get information, I've got paperwork and everything proving this. So everything I have said in the book is proven. Nothing I've said is not backed up with evidence. Every single thing I've said in the book, and Lucia. And Lucia did a sterling job on her section of the book. It was absolutely outstanding, her work. And we had some very good endorsements in the book. We've got 4 endorsements. Roger Landry wrote one of the endorsements. He's an American. He actually he does the Liberty Beacon. We've got Mayor Estenstein, when he was alive. He came in. He did a fantastic 1-page endorsement. Vera Schreibner, she did another one. She's a doctor. She's a scientist, retired scientist, and her work is absolutely phenomenal. We had also the Dr. Michael Innes wrote the foreword of the book, and his foreword, again, it was an excellent foreword, and he has worked with me for many years on false accusations of child abuse, and so his piece in the book is actually very valuable to parents.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You've got these two sides to what you do.
Yes, absolutely. It's just, I do work very hard to support parents. I've been writing all week to people in prison, sending them Christmas cards, trying to give them support. I'm working tirelessly. I had a lovely present from a lady today. She's a Facebook friend, and she came on, and I worked with her family years ago, just giving her paperwork, giving her information, helping her get reports, that kind of thing. And she gave me a fantastic card today with beautiful pictures of her little boy, saying that they'd won their case, and a lot of it was thanks to my information and thanks to the hard work I put into her case, and thank you for all I do. So it is nice when you get that kind of thing, and she's not the only one that's done this year. So this is really, it keeps me going, and it makes me feel that what I'm doing is worthwhile.
Yes, remember the last show I did with Alyssa Neathery,
Yes.
whose child was basically killed by 13 vaccines being administered just after the child was born. And that was a really, really shocking case. But I'm just going to read something now from the Gavi website. And this is a quote from Dagfinn Høybråten, who will this week chair a Gavi board meeting for the last time before stepping down at the end of the year. Here he reflects on 5 years at the helm of the Vaccine Alliance, steering Gavi through some of the momentous events in its 15-year history. It says here, how would you describe your 5 years as Gavi board chair? And he says, in my 30 years as a public servant, including spells as a minister, a member of parliament and leadership roles in public administration, I have had the honour of working for several humanitarian causes. However, looking back, I can honestly say that I have never been involved in a single greater mission than Gavi's to save children's lives with vaccines. What can be more important? Our common achievements at Gavi will always stand out as a highlight in my public service. What do you think of that, Christina?
I think he probably genuinely believes it. I really do. A lot of these doctors and specialists seem to really believe that vaccines are helping children. And if you actually look at the ingredients and look at the stories that are going on and the deaths and the pain and the destruction that vaccines are causing, you want to shake them and say, for goodness sake, wake up. Please wake up. You know, if they only knew what was being said, I don't know whether they do or not, but if they knew what was being said behind the scenes, you know, it's absolutely terrible what's being said in these meetings. We've got paperwork from the Committee of the Safety of Medicines. We've got the papers from the Ministry of Defence. We've got papers from JCVI, which is the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation. We've got papers from ARVI, which is another subgroup, and that's the adverse reactions to vaccines and immunisations. We've got all these papers to all these groups, and what they're saying in these meetings and behind closed door, and the conflicts of interest that we've actually disclosed to the public, showing them what's going on. We won't call it a must-read book. We don't believe in that. But we do encourage people to look at the book and see the book and discover what's going on for themselves and try to understand what's going on behind the scenes, and, you know, to be warned about the children and what vaccines they're having, and are the children having too many vaccines, and what went on with the Gulf War, why were so many soldiers given all these vaccines, and why are they so very injured today? These are questions we ask, and we want the public to really think about what's going on.
Yeah, these questions have to be asked very soberly, and with a lot of real scientific proof, which is basically proving all of this stuff with fact. It's very interesting looking on this website because it's very revealing when it says here, what was your goal when you were appointed chair? And have you achieved it? This is the same guy we're just talking about. He said, at the time I took over as chair, the Vaccine Alliance had a shortfall of US dollars 3.7 billion, and we had no chief executive. My immediate priority was to help secure funding and to get a good CEO in place. So it's kind of very interesting that, because his first statement was that it was about saving children, but really he's changed it in this second paragraph, because this was his first objective, which was the finance.
Yes, you'd have thought it was the safety of children. You'd have thought that if he really believed what he'd been saying, you know, earlier on, that his first objective would be the safety of children and to save the children worldwide. And what does he come in with? He comes in with money and a good CEO and securing finance. Don't you think they've got enough finance? There's enough finance there. You know, the prices of the vaccines that they're giving these children in the developing countries. And I've been working with Dr. Nagari recently, And Dr. Nagari is a very good friend of mine. And we've been working together on the vaccines that are being given to the girls in Kenya, with the HCG the tetanus vaccine. These are vaccines that are only given to the girls out there. And they're given to girls between the ages of 14 and 49, the childbearing ages. Why? Because it includes the HCG hormone. And the HCG hormone prevents them from carrying children. So it virtually makes them sterile. It sterilises the children in Africa, in Kenya.
Well, this is what we're getting to, isn't it? This is the mass depopulation programme. Yeah. And this is a great one. I'm just going to do a bit of parallel editing here with what we're saying, because I'm going to go back to another quote that this guy said. So I think it's brilliant. He said, "I will never forget the electric atmosphere at Gavi's first replenishment conference in London, June 2011. When the final numbers were shared with me, I had to pinch myself. Was this really happening? The pledges amounted to US dollars 4.3 billion. US dollars 16 million more than our request." Now, it's funny, really, when you think about it, that the penny doesn't drop with these people, you know? I mean, they're putting it out there. It's very, very obvious that about what the overall agenda is here. And he said, "The success was a result of many contributions, but we would never have achieved success without the extraordinary and crucial leadership of Prime Minister David Cameron of the UK, Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg of Norway, and Bill Gates."
Oh yes, they work hand in hand. They're best friends, you know. And this really, really irritates me, because I know what's going on. I've seen the paperwork I've done. I've been, helping with Dr. Nagari. I've put out radio shows. I've written articles about the HCG hormone and what it's doing. Now they've introduced another tetanus vaccine. No, it's not. It's polio vaccine this time. It was a polio vaccine, and this one includes, I can't remember. It's another hormone.
Well, that doesn't particularly matter. Are you still there, Christina?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, shout up, because it sounds like it's very, very windy where you are at the moment, but I know that's the joys of Skype. So
yes, it's bad. Sorry. My Skype is bad. Is that better?
That's a lot better. Yeah, just get nearer to the microphone.
Yeah, I can't get much nearer, but I've got a laptop in between me, but I'm trying. Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Right. Yes, I mean, they're now sterilising the boys. They're using this other hormone. It's the estrogen. That's it, the estrogen. They're putting the estrogen in the vaccines. So it's polio vaccination, giving it to the young boys, and this prevents them from producing sperm. So they're dead keen on the depopulation of Africa. And this is absolutely terrible. They can prove it. They can prove it with paperwork, and consequently, they've given the paperwork to me, and I've proved it. So, we are using paperwork. We're using the testing. Other people are doing studies on the tests that they're doing. They're doing the studies at the moment. I won't, let anyone know who they are at the moment, because the study is being done. But we're all working very closely with Dr. Nagari. And he's doing such good work. He really is a very, very brave man indeed. And he's letting it be known that this is not going to continue. He will prevent this from happening.
Yes, he's a brilliant speaker as well, and very passionate, and that's what we need more of.
Yes, he is. He's really helped me. We've done 2 or 3 very good radio shows together, highlighting these issues. He's so outraged by what's happening, and so he should be. And this is, again, it's all the same groups. It's Gavi, it's UNICEF, it's all the same organisations, the World Health Organization, all getting together to give them the vaccines to these children. They've been working on these for years and years and years. I've got papers going back to 1960, 70s, stating that they're going to try and use the tetanus vaccines to sterilise the children. And if you look at it, look at the paperwork, look at the World Health Organization Health Organization paperwork and look at the papers behind the scenes and find out what's going on. They're talking about how they're going to introduce it, how this particular hormone interacts with the tetanus toxoid in the vaccines and can cause sterility. So they've been working on this for years and years and years, and now it's come to fruition. They're actually putting it into the vaccines and introducing it. And my book the book we've written is very, very important because of the fact that we're highlighting what's going on behind the scenes. And although we're highlighting it in our own government, you've got to realise that Gavi is very, very tied into our government. And so is UNICEF, so is Bill Gates, and you've got to realise what he's doing and what's happening in other countries. So this book is a worldwide book. It's not just UK. It may have a UK title. We may be using the papers in the UK, but we're also talking about other issues that's affecting the world.
Yeah, indeed. And what we really need to think about here is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation seems to be into everything. You know, their contribution to this is quite massive. But getting back to this, it's a worldwide program, and it's very, very cleverly implemented. I mean, we're seeing the results of that now with these Agenda 21 policies. But I think unless people link the UN into this global picture with vaccination, the Agenda 21, or as it's now been rebranded, Agenda 2030 policies, then they won't get it. But what I find is very encouraging is that once this is put together in quite a simple way, people are now getting it, whereas 5 to 10 years ago they weren't, because these vaccines are being pushed mercilessly. I even get text messages now saying that my flu vaccine is due, and I was registered at a very small doctor's, and they never used to do this. But the corporatisation has crept into every area now, so it's becoming much more obvious. So do you think this is going to help people wake up to what's going on, Christina?
Yes, because these papers do discuss the flu vaccine, they discuss the DPT. We discuss loads and loads of vaccines in this paper. But the main one is the Plusrex, the main one is the MMR that was used during these years. But we do discuss other vaccines as well, particularly Vaccination. And I think it's very, very interesting the way that we've gathered all the information and poured it all together, and not to frighten parents, not to alarm people, but the way we've done it is to show what's going on behind the scenes. Just as it was with the CDC and the MMR and the CDC that William Thompson highlighted, about the African American children, the boys, becoming autistic, and what they were trying to hide and what they were trying to sort of sit on. It's exactly the same thing. It's all hidden agendas, hidden things that people don't know about, and we just feel that it's important that people do know about it and do know what's going on in these government meetings. And as soon as Lucia Tomajanovic put the papers, originally she put the bits and pieces on the internet, as soon as she started highlighting it and putting it on the internet, all the papers, the government papers, came down. Why was this? Why did they take the papers down? They'd been up there for a very long time, and suddenly she started highlighting the issues. You see, what they try to do is hide things. They're in plain sight, but you just don't know they're there because you're not looking for them.
Well, this is a very important point, Christina, because this goes very, very wide into the Agenda 21 thing as well, because all the documents which relate to what's happening are available to the public, but the public don't look at them. It's only when they're featured and polarised and put on a website somewhere that this happens. So that's very, very interesting. Now, where can people get this book?
They can get it from Amazon, and they can get it it's a Kindle book as well. It's from Amazon. They can get it from CreateSpace, the publishers that we use. I think you can get it on Amazon UK and Amazon USA, both of them. We've done it at a very reasonable price. We've put it down at a very low price so that people can access it. It's not one of these expensive books. It's $10.99, and for a book with the amount of information we've put in it and the amount of time, I mean, it took me 10 years of research and 5 years to write it, and I only wrote half the book. So if you can see the amount of work that's gone into this, it's gone over years. I mean, I think, people, it's a good idea that people should try and read it, try and look at it and see what's going on. Because we're talking about the different things. We're talking about very high up professionals, in the UK. We're talking about, she talks a lot about David Salisbury. We literally prove that these professionals, Lisa Blakemore-Brown, Andrew Wakefield, all this information is proven, Dr. Rebecca Carley. We don't mention some of the professionals that the information's proving, Jane Donegan, all these professionals that have been destroyed or they've really tried to destroy. Some of them are sort of clinging on, like Jane, she's wonderful, she's still working hard on it all. So they are being destroyed because of the information that's coming out. And they don't want to, because they try and push this and say, hang on a minute, this is not right. They try to destroy them. They call them paranoid. They try to discredit them. They do all sorts of things to discredit them. They take
but a lot of that stuff isn't working anymore, is it, Christina? Because people are actually waking up to it, which is very encouraging on all levels, actually. And that's not just a generalised statement, it's through my own research. So the book's called Vaccination Policy and the UK Government, The Untold Truth.
Yes.
And that's available now from the sources that have just been quoted. I'd like to thank you, Christina, for that. This is the first show that I've done on People's Internet Radio, and it sounds like there is a hurricane where you are. It's probably just Skype, though, in my headphones.
It is. It's probably the Skype. I'm very sorry about that. I haven't got a good Skype. I could have done it on the mainline phone.
Well, you may not have a good Skype, but you have a very good mind and a very inquiring mind. And I've been talking to you for several years now, and you always come up with some really sterling information and information that should be out there. So, Christina Illing, thanks very much for being on Windows on the World.
Thank you very much for having me, and it was lovely to speak to you again.
I'll speak to you soon, Christina. We're just going to have a very short break now, and then we're going to be talking to Jim Vierra and Hugh Newman about a new book called Giants on Record, which is a bit of a passion of mine, actually. The research into the legends and indeed the reality of the giants. So we're going to have a quick tune and come straight back.
I got my heart on my mind. We drifted apart. I gotta jump on the clock. I gotta find me some time. Your hands round my throat. You got your voice in my head. No matter what, you better jump on the clock. You better watch when you tread. they got their rationales. They had their Willie Streets. It's never enough. They better jump on the clock. They better count up their weeks.
Welcome back to Windows on the World. This is the first show that I'm doing on People's Internet Radio, and I'm enjoying it very much. We've just spoken to Christina England. At the beginning of the show, I was very anxious to get Christina on because she was on a rather dodgy Skype connection. I may not have mentioned that in the second part of the show, we have Jim Vierra and Hugh Newman talking about giants. There's a new book that they've co-authored, and it's called Giants on Record, which covers a lot of different findings and the involvement of the Smithsonian Institute in the, basically, you could call it a cover-up, really, because a lot of these giant bones were taken off display, or they seem to have just been hidden from public view, and you can actually get access to them in certain places like Malta, for instance. But in Malta, they were taken off public view around in the 60s. But if you actually go to the museums and request to look at the bones, then you can see them, which really begs the question as to why. So I spoke to Hugh Newman and Jim Vierra, and this is about really their new book, Giants on Record. So let's listen to the interview. Hugh Newman and Jim Vierra, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thanks for having us on, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
It's really interesting talking to you guys now because I've been following what you've been doing for quite a number of years. I've looked into the subject of your recent book, Giants on Record, America's Hidden History, Secrets in the Mounds and the Smithsonian Files, which has a foreword by Ross Hamilton, who's the author of A Tradition of Giants. And you've put together a very, very interesting compilation of historical accounts. So first of all, Hugh, you run the Megalithomania talks, which are on every year. And
yes.
Just tell us a bit how you got into the particular subject of giants.
Well, it's through the megaliths, basically. The more you look into megalithic sites, the more you find legends and stories of giants. Even my home village, Cherry Hinton near Cambridge, where I was brought up, they have legends of giants, Gog and Magog in the hills nearby, and Wonderbury and the war ditches and the giant's grave. So even every day I was in the vicinity of giants. I actually found giant skeletons in Cherry Hinton as well, which we discussed briefly in the introduction to the book. But it's really through the megaliths that got me into it, and eventually I made my way over to America, and I explored New England. This is before I knew Jim, who was also doing the research at the same time. And there's megalithic sites here in New England, where we are now, in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all over. And that kind of intrigued me. And then I continued traveling around America and kept coming across these accounts of these giant skeletons being found, especially in mounds, but also I came across a book by Ross Hamilton, who brilliantly wrote a foreword to our book, and he wrote a book called A Tradition of Giants, which blew my mind when I read it, and it really made me realise this was a real phenomenon. This wasn't just legends, folklore, stories and things like that. It was a genuine phenomenon, and it was related to the site I was investigating. So that kind of opened up the door for me. Then I met Jim at a conference, Megalithomania conference I organised in Glastonbury, Connecticut, like we do in Glastonbury, England as well. And we stayed in touch and decided we need to do a book. And then we got a TV show, Search for the Lost Giants. It was Jim and Bill, his brother, starred in. And it's just sort of grown since then, no pun intended.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I think people should be aware of is that we're talking about sort of very tall people here, not like 20-foot giants. We're talking about 7 to 8 foot people who seem to have been found in many parts of the world.
Absolutely, yeah, I'll just jump in. Well, we're talking, actually, we've got accounts that go up to 18 feet. It's a bit crazy, this one account of 18 foot. We think it's probably exaggerated. But we have accounts going up to 10 feet, 12 feet, 14 feet. Some that are even mentioned up to 8 feet tall in the Smithsonian's own annual reports. There are stories all around the world that we're starting to properly investigate. Jim's mainly collected, but I've been involved in collecting about 500 accounts worldwide. So it's a global phenomenon, but it seems America is the hub of it. It's like the sort of, it could be the origin point, but it's most certainly the most prolific amount of skeletons that have been found in North America.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the mound builders a little bit later on. But first of all, Jim, could you tell us how you got into this field?
I'm a stonemason by trade, and I was investigating the possibility of Native American stonework in New England, which isn't really thought to be a reality. We know Native people built with stone all around the country, but in New England, it's everything you see in the woods is attributed to colonial builders. So as an activity to try to figure out whether that were true or not, I would spend a lot of time reading through old historical texts, town and county histories, and oftentimes find accounts of pre-existing stonework when the colonists showed up, which is very interesting. But what I started to encounter also was giant skeleton accounts, often mentioned with double rows of teeth. And there's been a lot of controversy around that also, this idea of double rows of teeth. What does it mean? But I just dove into the subject, read through thousands and thousands of pages of town and county histories, and started to compile a consistent record of very tall people found in burial mounds, skeletons found in burial mounds, and just started to look at this phenomenon from many other viewpoints too, from the idea of Native American oral traditions, which talk about giants, all the tribes around the country, the accounts of early explorers, mystics, secret societies like the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner. They all mention giants as a historical fact, which is very odd. And, piece together this story that is, it's strange, it's controversial. An anthropologist would say that all this literature doesn't line up with the anthropological record. They have basically, 6.5, 7 foot Edema people are probably the tallest skeletons they found. But it's a wild phenomenon. I really I'm compelled to continue to figure out if there's veracity in it all. You just, as you said, you went through some of the book and you see account after account all around the country, like the jawbone fit over the face of the largest man, things that it would seem so almost impossible to fake into hoax and to get all these people in on the same specific, hoax, for instance, in an era of inefficient communication. I just find the whole thing fascinating, and we've got really good feedback on the book, and the compilation of all the evidence.
It's a very good book and a very good compilation. Do you think that what this is really doing is it's casting doubt on, say, who the Native Americans were, and do you think that could possibly be it, that there is some kind of rivalry going on here of who was first?
That's a tricky question. The anthropological evidence points to Native American peoples being buried in the mounds, being the builders of the mounds. And at the time that the Europeans found places like Cahokia and Etowah and Moundville, they attributed all these constructions to a lost race, or the Greeks, or the Britons. One of the reasons is the similarity between the henges and the earthworks and the mounds in ancient America, and the same stuff you find in Europe and Sweden and in different countries there. But it was really this kind of a racist argument that the Native Americans didn't have a level of sophistication to do these things. And that isn't true. What we would say, I guess, I'll speak for Hugh, is that, and Ross Hamilton would say that Native Americans had a royal class, a bloodline, if you will, of rulers that were particularly tall, the shamans, the wizards, the geomancers, the force that organized all these incredible earthworks, massive geometric forms that predicted eclipses and things like that. And they were the ones that were guiding many of these civilizations we're talking about, many of these societies. And genetically, yeah, I don't think it's, did they come from another place? And they're Native Americans, but I think we'll all agree that all Native Americans didn't come down by the land bridge, if you will. So, yeah.
I mean, there's also one of the weird things about what Jim talking about, you just asked, is that even in the Native American myths, and we've got quite a few accounts in the book, there is evidence of other sort of types of human being in North America in a very archaic time. They even talk about these strange bearded people, these people with red hair and fair skin, and you have these unusual accounts of cuneiform tablets turning up that date back to over 2000 BC in the possession of some chiefs, suggesting Sumerians may have even visited. So there's a big question mark over that. And one of the things we cover in the book is looking at, what are the origins of these people? I mean, what is really going on here? Because, as Jim said, it's not all just people coming over the land bridge. There's like a lot more to it than that. It seems like there's an origin point of a certain type of human in America. There's very modern type skulls that have been found that are 50, 70,000 years old, almost sort of Caucasian or European-looking skulls. So there's a lot of controversy, and you have to tread really carefully. It's very kind of political, controversial subject. And with NAGPRA, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which came out in 1990, all Native American remains, artifacts and everything else are now being taken away and reburied. But this includes remains that are tens of thousands of years old sometimes, which people don't know who really these people were. So there's a lot of question marks over the origins of peoples in North America. But generally, what we talk about is, Native Americans traditionally, and there was this elite class, and this royal group, which kind of dominated, ruled the country.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'll jump in for a second. If this is a reality, it's not just a Native American reality, it's a reality around the world. In England and France, we have, similar accounts, outrageous, 28, 30, 34-inch circumference skulls found in France. Mentioned over and over again. Same thing, in England, jawbone over the face, Lundy Island, 8'2", 8'4". There has to be an anthropological mystery. There has to be anthropological evidence to figure out the puzzle here, to tell a story. It's not just myths and fairies and unicorns. There has to be some link, and it could be hidden in plain sight. It's not just tall NBA players. It's like massive-jawed, enormous, proportional, huge people we're talking about over and over again. And, it's just a really, really interesting thing. We talk to anthropologists and archaeologists all the time. We're friends with many. We discuss these things, and they're like, well, I need physical evidence. And then I'm like, Jesus, it's pretty hard to come by. We're hoping that the new finds, like the Denisovans, the Heidelbergensis finds in South Africa, something can yield the evidence we're looking for because the moral and ethical implications of researching this are very challenging, and we don't want to disrupt graves. We couldn't if we wanted to. It's illegal. So hopefully science will come and meet in us and either prove or disprove these theories.
Are we talking about many different species over possibly hundreds of thousands of years here?
I wouldn't say so. No, I think we're dealing with humans. Stars. Let's just clear that one up. But I don't know about different species. I mean, what we do find in the DNA evidence is links. There's like 3 or 4% of native tribes in North America have Denisovan DNA. There's other things like we have haplogroup X DNA, which comes over from potentially Europe and the Middle East. There's small amounts of that in certain areas, which go back, can go back up to 10,000 years old. We do find slightly different skull types, which is something we don't like to talk about too much, but it's just, you do find that, so you get different types of human. But then again, you get that everywhere. So it's become this real kind of, when we discuss it thoroughly in the Origins of the Tall Ones chapter at the very end of the book and look at all these possibilities. But there is folklore evidence and oral tradition which talks about giant human beings around at the same time as the megafauna, i.e. mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths, beavers, etc. And so we're talking at least 12,000 years ago, because we know when they died off. We certainly know when they shrunk, in size and died off, which is around the time of the so-called Younger Dryas impact event, which is, which could have caused the whole flood cataclysm. It's something Graham Hancock and others are very strong, they strongly believe this is what happened. And so there's evidence of before that of giants like herding mammoths like cattle. And so these guys must have been pretty big to do that, unless they were tiny mammoths, which is unlikely. So there's a lot going on here. The more you look into it, the more you find these little clues, these little pieces of evidence, which not only are found now in the graves that are found in the mounds and other, caves, and even people when they're just digging their basements, they're finding bones and skulls and double rows of teeth, even some horned skulls being discovered, which are freaky, which is one of Jim's favourites.
Oh, God.
Yeah, let's get on to that, because that is very anomalous, that. So have you actually seen these and verified these, and have they been verified by experts, these horned skulls?
The horn skull, I think I'll take that one. It's especially one of the subjects I'm slightly obsessed by. But no, I mean, all the skulls have gone missing, the horn skull. I mean, virtually all the stuff we're talking about has gone missing, unfortunately. There are a few skeletons here and there, a few bones and this, that and the other, but it's all been taken away by NAGPRA. And before that, the Smithsonian got involved. The horn skulls, I mean, you get people with horn skulls now. It's a thing. It's not like it's the rarest thing in the world. It does happen occasionally. So I would imagine the ones we're dealing with is some of them are misinterpreted, and they thought they were horns, but they just sort of think deer horns around their head or whatever. But you do find that you even find little people. They find little skeletons that have got horns, tails, and things like this. There's even reports from the 1500s of Spanish explorers witnessing giants and these little people in the same place along, I think it was either the Mississippi River or it was the, what's that other river called? It was one of the rivers that goes into California. And so there's a lot of anomalies. We have a whole chapter on anatomic anomalies, which talks about all these different things, including elongated skulls. You get a lot of that with these giants. But also the double rows of teeth, which is probably the strangest anomaly and most consistent anomaly relating to the giants that we've come across.
What would be the advantage of that? Of having 2 rows of teeth?
Well, a lot of them were cannibals, you see. And so that would come in handy. But I don't know. That's one of the genetic traits we keep coming across. We talked to a dental anthropologist from New York University called Dr. Shara Bailey, and she is as confused as we are. I mean, we showed her all the accounts. We haven't seen a skull. They've all been taken away. But there's even, this does happen as well. This is like a modern phenomenon. It does happen. There's various different, ways you can describe it in the scientific world. But you do get people with more than 1 row of teeth sometimes, extra teeth, supernumerary teeth, and so on and so forth. And it dates back to at least 6,000 years in the Americas, in the Great Lakes area, bordering Canada. And so we know it has existed for a long time. But it seems the larger you are, the more space you have, and there may be genetic triggers that allow this genetic abnormality to come through. That's one of the theories, anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned selective breeding, and that takes us on to this idea of some kind of priest class, which does interest me, especially with the cradle boarding, and what cradle boarding was imitating.
We always say that's really an interesting subject. It's not, just Peru. You probably saw the new find in France, a beautiful, preserved, elongated skull. It's all around the world, and it's cultures that I think it's a real simple, what the hell is going on question. Like, you have these civilizations that were never in contact, at least we're told they weren't, and they're doing such an extreme, strange behavior, and usually only to the royal class of the tribe or the town or whatever. And you have the same thing in the United States now, like the Adena people, the royal class with elongated skulls. And it's just the oddest thing. All around the ancient America, you have skull elongation. Peru, all around the Sonora regions, Mexico, all around Europe. I really think they're emulating something or someone. And what is it? Which gets, I'll say, if somebody would tune in and they would say, well, show me the 10-foot skeleton, I would say there is this alternative story to humanity that has many facets to it. Giants, little people, lost civilization, pre-ice age, advanced civilization, ancient sea kings. And it really, it flies in the face of what we're, being told is reality or is competent theory. And I don't know, I just keep coming around to Graham Hancock's, I was saying, some cataclysmic event just caused like PTSD in humanity, and we collectively obfuscate the truth from ourselves. It's just like, it seems like it's right there in myth and legend, comparative mythology, or traditions, historical records, and even, little people in Indonesia and new anthropological finds that are very odd, and skull elongations. Like, what is this? You would think if history were the way it's purported to be, all oral traditions, it would be obvious what they're talking about. They wouldn't talk about a different, basically, happening on Earth. The mystics, and you know what I'm saying? Like, if we would go to another planet and everything was just the way it was, in fact, we wouldn't have this strange, parallel existence where people are seeing things, people are reporting things, oral traditions are telling a different story. Does that make sense?
Yes, we're getting two versions of reality. There's the reality which we can explore and the one we're given, and the one we're given seems to be getting smaller. The parameters of it seems to be getting stretched inwards rather than outwards, and there seems to be this whole consensus idea of society, and our brains are being squeezed into more and more this generic idea of just a one world government and a one agenda, which I cover quite a lot. These are political things, but they do tie in to what's happening historically. So why is this being covered up?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I thought so.
This is something, we delve into in the book. We're not particularly blaming anyone for it, but we do kind of have a slight problem with the Smithsonian Institution. They see what was going on in the late 1800s when it was formed into the Bureau of Ethnology, then it became the Smithsonian Institution, especially the country's National Museum, which is it's not really even a governmental body. It's like, it's run by kind of individuals. But the problem with it is that they were discovering many of these finds. They actually employed hundreds of people to go around the country and collect best specimens of skulls, giant skulls, and various other things. And there was a strong agenda. There's two things really going on, three possibly. But the main one was Manifest Destiny. The other one was evolution was really taking shape here. And it was actually around that time it really kicked off and became known globally and was recognised globally in the academic realm. And so
that's what I was getting to, Hugh. You walk into the Natural History Museum, you're taken on this childlike tour, and it ends up with the missing link, Lucy, which we now know is a complete hoax, but it's still there. So we're propping up this academic consensus, which just appears to be a lie. And I suppose the really interesting question, as we've just said, is why? What are they trying to hide from us? And this is, I suppose, what we're all interested in, isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure, I agree. I mean, they're basically trying to hide the fact that giant humans existed in North America, that they were Native American, and they were more powerful, they were smart, and they were more sophisticated than these white men who appeared here in 1600s onwards. And so it became a problem. Also, it becomes a political and a money problem, because, if you see all these people as sophisticated, highly advanced, you can't really take their land off them, you can't kill them, you can't put them on reservations, but if you see them as savages, you can, and this is what they did. And it was all about land grabs, it was always about taking over the land, it was extremely racist. There was a lot of very bad people in the Smithsonian. Ailes had Leachka was one of them, he became the main man there in about 1910, and he was a known racist and eugenicist, and amongst other things. So there's a big problem here. It's a lot more than we can really talk about in this interview, but we do an entire chapter on the Smithsonian, and we're open-minded. We're kind of we sit on the fence. We're not trying to sort of force our views onto people or anything like that. But if you just piece all the different accounts together of the skeletons were sent to the Smithsonian, they were collected by the Smithsonian. Smithsonian found 17 giant skeletons themselves, and yet all of those are gone. Yeah, they found, even Hadlichka himself found a 36-inch skull. It's gone. None of these exist anymore. And then in 1936 or 37, Hadlichka announces giants are no more and discredits the whole phenomenon, even though there were thousands of newspaper reports and discoveries and everything else happening out in North America for the previous 50 or 100 years. And so there's a problem here. So there is an agenda, but it's not necessarily all about covering up giants. There was other things going on which triggered that to be covered up. It didn't fit in with what they were doing. It didn't work with evolution. It didn't want. If you're a spanner in the works of evolution, for God's sake, and so there's a lot to be said for that. But the fact that the Smithsonian themselves found so many and reported on so many with more than double rows of teeth and things like this, it does raise serious questions about who these people were and how they had the right to delete a part of history that we've now uncovered in our book.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing, because the higher you get up in this kind of pyramid of power and influence, the more interesting it gets. And for people who are kind of new to it, the more off the wall it gets, really, for them, because we're talking about concepts that are just not acceptable in modern history. Sorry, the way that's one of the things we focused on in the book is like we didn't want to force too many views on people. The accounts speak for themselves. That is what is interesting. Like if you put them in the correct order, in the right context, the accounts reveal the story. They reveal an unfolding story of what was going on. Not only about who once lived here, these giant people, these very sophisticated giant people, but also how it was meticulously, slowly covered up and sidelined and brushed under the carpet. And you can see it happening. And if you follow the trail, you can find it. This is something we were very focused on in the book. We very thoughtfully pieced it together. We didn't just throw tons of accounts in there. We really tried to create a kind of order to it so people can see the story unfolding. We comment on it and we discuss, what was going on around that time to put it in context as well. But there's a dark underbelly going on, and like this is one of the problems we have. And then you have the NAGPRA Act in 1990, and suddenly everything that was still on display is gone. And we totally respect the Native American right to bury the dead and everything like that. We don't have a problem with that, but we do have a problem that things that weren't necessarily Native American were buried as well. Everything was taken that could possibly give any proof to the giants. Yes, so they used the act to basically bury a lot of stuff that's on public display. Yeah. Now, it's very interesting. I'd like to go into a little bit of the mound builders, which is Jim's kind of area, really, isn't it? This is very interesting because let's just talk about the time scale of this, when they were around. And this idea, the mound builders, it goes across Europe, and we have in many parts of Britain these burial mounds. They call them burial mounds, but often they're cromlechs. They are stone structures, like, 3 massive stones with a capstone. Dolmens and cromlechs. And they always refer to them as burial chambers. Now, I've looked at some of the illustrations of these burial chambers across America, and most of them do look to be just constructed as burial chambers. But do these dolmens and cromlechs tie in with anything that's around these areas where you find these burial mounds?
Yeah, well, I'll say we were just, I was visiting here. We did a conference in London. I got to see Silbury Hill, go to Stonehenge and different sites around England. One of the interesting things is you have a similarity with, like I said, the earthen henges and the gateways and the complexes and the mound construction in the United States, as well as all around Europe. And I'll just answer it in a broader way. You have earthen pyramids in China. You have earthen pyramids in Illinois, like Cahokia. It just seems like, I don't know how it would be explained, like if, every beaver on the planet intuitively figures out how to build a dam or something like that. I tend to think that these constructions took place maybe because once we shared a global mother culture or homeland, if you will, a lost continent over 12,000 years ago, and these forces dispersed around the planet and kept the same symbolism, spiritual practice, building construction. But you find a lot of chambers within burial mounds in the United States, a lot of stone chambers. The Edina had a lot of wooden and stone tombs, and you have there's another thing when you talk about, and this is one of my big beefs, is that when I was in school I never learned about the mound builders. Over 100,000 earthen pyramids in geometric forms, amazing, astonishing accomplishments all over the country, most of the eastern half of the country, and you never heard about it in school. Is that a conspiracy? Even now, kids, nobody knows about, Cahokia, the Serpent Mound, and all this stuff. It's rarely taught, and it's just like we marginalize native civilization and culture so much that you don't know about these things. So when you tell somebody, listen, the mound building culture started in 3400 BC in Louisiana, and Poverty Point was built in 1500 BC, and it's astonishing and huge. And did you know there's a 100-foot earthen pyramid with a base bigger than the Great Pyramid, with 22 million cubic feet of soil to create it? These things are just astonishing. Is that a conspiracy that we don't know about that? And then you would say, well, that's racism, that's manifest destiny taking hold and things like that. And how about a class? We're not talking about everybody in ancient America was giant. We're saying what it looks to be occurring is that it was a royal class of extremely tall people, and like Hugh said, maybe it was just a lineage from the over 10,000 years, the age of megafauna and megaflora, and they were viewed as the kings and the queens and medicine men, and the bloodlines were kept together, and maybe these strange anatomic anomalies came from interbreeding, and you just have this kind of story that I don't know. Would you trust an oral tradition that's 12,000 years old, been meticulously passed down, or a secret society that passes down its information in a very precise, meticulous, and thoughtful way? Or basically a bunch of white guys making it up on the fly and figuring out what's going to work for them in a really, nasty, political, and profit-driven way?
Exactly, but an oral tradition has to be remembered perfectly and has to be spoken with truth, which goes back to the golden rule of law, which comes into this as well. So, yeah, those accounts would be much more reliable, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question fully. Yeah. Hugh might be able to address it too,
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. There were over 100,000 recorded earthworks and mounds in North America. Most of them gripped around the whole Mississippi River, but they spread out very widely. There are shell mounds, midden mounds, other things way up on the coasts of New England, Florida, all through California. I've just been down in Louisiana and Arkansas, and I've been to a few sites like Moundville in Alabama, Chickasaw Mound in northeast Arkansas, various other places. I went to Poverty Point, and it's so strange. As Jim said, it's over 1,500 years old officially, but there's a mound nearby called the Lower Jackson Mound, which has been dated 3,500 BC, and also Watson Break, which I actually tried to find, and I couldn't find it, Jim. Couldn't find Watson Break. We had a good look around. It's in the woods, in the middle of nowhere, so there's no markers or anything. So there's a lot of very ancient activity going on, which is over 1,000 years older than Stonehenge, 1,000 years older than the pyramids in North America, in the mound culture sites. And so we know that there was this sophistication going on, and there are connections with the Olmec. Probably contemporary with the Olmec of Mexico. But incidentally, I'm going to February on a tour, so if anyone wants to join us, they can. Quick advert there. And also, when you start looking at the mounds, one of the strangest thing about them, in my opinion, is not only the giants found in them, but they're astronomically aligned, perfectly, many of them, with incredible sophistication in geometry, metrology, number systems, and even earth energies. There's been tests done by a chap called John Burke, who's tested these strange energetic effects and realised that they're like agricultural fertility mounds and actually enhance seeds and grains and influence and promote fertility in the landscape. So these were like useful, these were like machines, they were like tools for the ancients, and they were very revered as such. And we believe, we found bits and pieces of evidence. It was actually the giants who actually created and manifested, kind of put out this high-level technology, this high-level knowledge and wisdom, and this is what got maintained through the elites, through the giant elite, and it spread out to many different cultures all around North America. And some of it now, thank God, is being found again.
Yeah, it's very interesting that, because even in this country where they say this is a burial mound, they often, and there's at least 2 instances of this I've seen, there's 2 small standing stones outside the enclosures which are not taken into consideration. But these look like they were used to walk in at sunset, you'd walk round and you'd walk into the space. And I did a show called The Ancient Energy Grid, where a lady was looking at piezoelectric conductivity in megaliths from all over the world, including Malta. And,
I saw that one, yeah.
Yeah, this is another thing that we're not really given access to. But, I mean, your part of the country, Glastonbury, the ley lines down there and the connectivity of what then became Christian sites is also very interesting. So it's been good actually to talk a little bit about the UK here because of the amount of ley lines and standing stones, and how that compares with what's in America, what's different and what's similar, just for people who may not know,
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I mean, let's start here. Let's start in New England, where me and Jim are now. This is where Jim lives. This is his hometown, his home area. And Jim's a stonemason, so he kind of builds, he works with stones. He understands the sort of sheer strenuous nature of the whole thing, whereas I don't do so much of that. I'm more into the mental side of it, if you like, but the exploring. But what we have here in New England, we have literally potentially hundreds of these potentially burial chambers. We call them in Britain or Ireland, but they're actually like chambers. They're often oriented to various solar or lunar alignments. They have piezoelectrical effects in them. They have magnetism, very strong magnetic anomalies. There are even very large dolmens here. There's one brilliant example in New York State, a place called North Salem. And then you have America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, which has got carbon dating going back 4,000 years. So we have what looks like British megalithic sites here in New England. But as soon as you hit like New York State and you head further west, you get to western New York, Pennsylvania, and you move over towards the Mississippi River, you start getting the mound, you get the mound cuts, there isn't as much stone there to work with, but you do find some occasional examples. This is something Jim's looked into in more detail than me, is you have stone-lined chambers, stone-lined mounds. So each of these mounds are not just earthen mounds, although they've got very interesting layering throughout them, which you find Silbury Hill sites in England, and probably the lady who was on your show talking about the energy. They actually have megalithic kind of chambers inside them. This is often where the giants are buried. So this is like, and you do find similar things in Britain. So there are remarkable comparisons. If you look at the Fogus, or the sort of underground chambers in Cornwall, they are almost identical to what you find in parts of New England. And so the list goes on. You can keep making comparisons. You can even find the same measurement systems encoded. You can find the same geometries encoded, the same type of henges and ditches and alignments. And so I think, we're pretty clear there was global activity going on in prehistory. And this whole giant elite were part of that, and that they were travelling, they were moving across different countries. There's evidence of seafaring going way back to the Solutreans who came over from Europe to America 15,000 years ago. You get it on the other side of America, California, Channel Islands. You have evidence going back at least 20 or 30,000 years of seafaring people. And so it starts to get really strange the more you look into this. But there are always comparisons between these places, and the spatial relationship between sites and the ley lines and things like that are also very similar.
Yes, that's something, this whole idea of enchanting the landscape, which John Michel talked about, is Hugh's mentor. People are, I notice this whole thing for me has been a study in human psychology and realizing there's a lot of true believers who don't engage in critical thinking and believe things without investigating themselves. There's a lot of hardened skeptics who basically are lizard brain morons who can't get off other than insulting people and have no desire to be objective. And we try to meet in the middle and just look at what's happening in society. We have a dehumanizing, sociopathic elite that's running the show that's pissing everyone off. And then they believe that archaeology and anthropology are an arm of that. And I wouldn't say that's the case. It's not like, like the weapons industry or something like that. It's just a collection of people just trying to do their job, trying to figure things out. But at the core of it, there's been a lot of good, building of cases and theories over the last 80, 90 years. But the base of what we believe about humanity, I think, is wrong. And Graham Hancock is wonderful at pointing these things out. And I just think people are, they intuitively know something is amiss. They don't like what we've done to society and nature and native peoples, and it's like they're just sick and tired of the way things are, especially here in the U.S. I mean, it's such everybody's into 20 screens at once. Nobody's really engaged like they should be in the real world, in the material world, in the natural world. So I see all these things happening, and we're trying to just say, try to stay in the middle, try to be objective. But there's this huge thrust in humanity to wake up from this horrible sleep we've been in. I really feel like people are fascinated with these subjects for a reason, because they intuitively know there's truth in them. And when you start a cold case as an investigator, you have a bunch of questions. So Hugh and I would say I've made what I would consider maybe mistakes, theorized wrong, collected data, experimented, changed my mind, talked to other people, changed my mind. But generally, the bottom line is there seems to be veracity to all the myths and legends of giants, and the idea that the Earth is has a grid pattern and is a living entity, and that you can manipulate the Earth in a positive way for the benefit of all. To get back to your point about ley lines and sacred sites.
Very interesting. That brings us to the kind of reverse of that. The giants had a terrible bad reputation, really, in a lot of ways. Like they ate people, they were indulging in strange sexual practices, they were very decadent, and they were disliked. Now, is that propaganda? What's your opinion on that?
No, I don't. I've got to be honest with you. I mean, we did a lot of research on the legends of the tall ones. There's a whole chapter on it, in fact, and we only covered a very small amount. There's so many, and so I'm quite a firm believer that as you mentioned earlier, the oral tradition is extremely accurate. And so I don't think so. I think like what we find here are genuine races of cannibalistic giants who used to roam America, terrorizing Native Americans. Some of these were described as fair-skinned with ginger and black hair, beards and things like that. So it could just have been us lot, a bunch of giants from England going over there, Scottish giants or something. And so who knows? But there is a lot of that. But you get weirdly though, these are very, very old stories, old legends. And isn't it odd that you get the same thing with Jack the Giant Slayer or Jack the Giant Killer in England, with Gog and Magog and things like this? It's the same stories in the Bible. Yeah. Cannibalistic giants terrorizing people. They're all warriors. One of the traditions you find in various parts of America is the stone giants or the stone-ish giants. And these were said to have sort of like skin that was like rock, and arrows would not penetrate them, and you couldn't kill them. And these would terrorize certain people, and these were all cannibalistic, and they used to chase them. And even there's a story we didn't manage to get it in the book. We found out afterwards. We'll probably put it in our next book. There's a Hopi tradition of giants terrorizing them, and this is why they often built their little habitations up in the rock in the cliff dwellings, and so the giants couldn't reach them. And also many of there's like these stone and earthen forts all over the Ohio Valley and various parts of America, which there are stories we feature in the book which say, partly they speculate that they were built to protect themselves from the terrorizing giants. So yeah, you do get that. You get that side of it, but you also get a whole other side to it, where they were extremely helpful, they were extremely spiritual people. You have the new hymn, which we feature in the final chapter, which Ross Hamilton educated us about, who were like the equivalent, really, of the Nephilim and the Watchers of the Bible, but they were like very cool, nice people who would teach and look out for local tribes. And you also have other ones, this is very archaic stories, where they would kind of come down from the heavens and help build all the canals and sites for them, and then they would disappear again. They were known as thunderbirds and things like this. So there's a lot of different stories and traditions. I mean, in our 420-page book, you can only fit so much in, and there's a lot more to it than what we've found. We know there is. We've seen it. So there's a real story here that I think I don't know why we feel very strongly about it, that it needs to be told, needs to be put out there. And fortunately, we pulled it together in this book and in the 6-part TV show we did last year. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and of course, the very famous quote, Book of Enoch, I think, there were giants on the earth in those days, men of renown. I think most people have come across that. If they've been looking at videos about giants on YouTube, that they use that one a lot. But it does go through everything, and it's clearly there in some kind of historical record. I mean, you've got a great example at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, 7-foot 6-inch skeleton, which was sold to the museum in 1921. You can clearly see that. But I think it brings us back to what we were starting to talk about at the beginning, that these were not massive giants. They were just tall people, a lot of them.
But they were. But the thing about them, which a lot of people don't realise, is that when we talk about tall people today, we talk about basketball players, things like that, and they're very lanky, they're very thin, and this, that, and the other. But these people, they were proportionately large, you know what I mean? So everything was larger, it was, so they were powerful, strong people. And this is not gigantism, this is not acromegaly, this is just being very large and very strong. You had different facial features, you had slightly different physical body features, the bones and the muscle structure. And so there was, so people just don't understand this, that they often had perfect teeth as well. Their teeth never rotted. They were almost like these perfect beings. And even when the early presidents met some of I think Thomas Jefferson met one of the Osage chiefs, he said they were the most stately and handsome and powerful people he had ever seen. And so they were around up until the 1900s. I mean, this is some of the 7-foot chiefs. And so there's something about them. And some of them, there's some very, very solid accounts that talk about 9, 10-foot tall giants there. And there's some, I believe, more than Jim, that there's very solid accounts of some that are 14 feet as well. But we just don't know that yet. But we have found some evidence in France that we're investigating for our next book, which will be about the global phenomenon, of an 11-foot giant that was definitely, we know there were bones, we know it was measured properly, and so we know people can get that tall and live healthily. And the other thing, which is what we found when researching the book, and this is also mentioned in the Old Testament, is the longevity of the lifespans of these giants often reached in excess of 200 years in North America. Now, everyone I've spoken to academically claims that the taller you are, the bigger you are, the shorter your lifespan, but it's the wrong way round, and this is something that we've just started to find out, that the stories in the Bible, the brilliant Lakota elder, who was also a scholar and an activist, called Vine Gloria Jr., who died 10 years ago, actually. He collected and worked with all the chiefs of the Native American tribes who were still alive at the time, collected these stories, and that their ancestors were living over 200 years.
It's a good point. I'm hardly a biblical literalist. I just view it as a historical document that, that you can see these consistent stories, but longevity, that we're talking about, like we're like children, we think we have all these answers, but all throughout history, virtually every society was predominantly wrong with their theories. What do we have wrong? And they think their technological advances are taking care of, all this probability that they may be wrong. It's not true. We are wrong about a whole host of things, and what is it? And you look back, and we're talking about, say, a more perfected human that was, like Hugh said, just described so many times in the past as like large, proportional, stately, could run, 80 miles a day, would have, incredible strength and stamina, intellect, or like all of these gifts that we see, as normal humans get screwed out of, and longevity, like in the Bible, 200, 400, 800 years, things like that, and you find it in other historical texts. So I just really think that if you landed on this planet, you would just shake your head at about what is, if you had the book of truth next to, the version of reality that we have collectively created to explain our origins and our past, it would be so divergent. It would be unbelievable. And I just feel like we, in the whole exploration of this, I know myself, I got confused with the idea of having to prove that this was a reality versus just kind of defending the position of open-minded investigation, that this subject is worthy of investigation. So I don't want to sit here and defend every point and go back and forth. I just want to, say to anyone who wants to research something they feel compelled to is just, all you need to do is just gather your information, make a case, be open-minded, be willing to hear what you don't want to hear, and just put together a coherent theory. And to hell with, the skeptic or the debunker. It's really, somebody could pick this book up in 50 years after they find, Denisovan bones that are 9.5 foot tall and say, well, these guys caught a lot of shit, but they were right on top of the story, So I think that's where Hugh and I come from.
I really like the book because you're just presenting the facts, you're presenting evidence, you're presenting historical accounts,
yes.
Which is a very interesting thing as well because you also present the hoaxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, get those out of the way first.
Yeah. No, I thought that was very good. And the way the book concludes with the theory that the atmosphere was different, there was more CO2. Would you like to wrap up with that? Because that's a very, very interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the theories we present in the book. We don't necessarily believe that's definitely what happened or anything like that, but we think it's just a compelling story that, as we were researching, we kept hearing about this thing. I thought, well, actually, let's just investigate it and let's have a proper look at this. And we found some very strange stories, some very good science on that the higher CO2 level, only 0.5% more, we're talking a small amount, were prevalent about over 12,000 years ago, before this so-called Younger Dryas or whatever cataclysm it was. And that would trigger various things in your hypothalamus and different glands. And this is what kept the megafauna big, it kept the plant life big, and so on and so forth. Of course, way before that, we have the dinosaurs as well. And it was supposedly after this cataclysm, it affected the atmosphere and triggered this kind of what traditionally was called the dark tents, where like a black sky, like soot and fires everywhere, especially in this part of the world, and also the flooding as well, because the ice caps were hit by asteroids, so there was a lot of flooding. Noah's flood could be part of the same thing. Hundreds, if not thousands, of flood myths around the world. So this would affect CO2 and reduce it down a bit. So everyone starts shrinking. This is just a general idea. We've got much more detail here, but the other thing we kind of looked at as well was the idea that electromagnetic energies, natural electromagnetic energies that occur after cataclysmic events, could actually affect the size of bones and body mass. And I found that really interesting. And also, you have it, the higher latitude you are, or the lower latitude, like nearer South or North Pole, the taller you are. And you also get influenced by diet as well. If you're eating a lot of omega-3s, fish, things like this, you can increase your body mass and height slightly. And so there's different aspects of why this was happening. But I think it's more than that. I think there was just a different type of human being on Earth for a very, very time. And now we're just starting to see what was going on here. This is not in the historical record. You do find examples around the world of oversized different types of humans. You have Homo heidelbergensis in South Africa, between 7 and possibly 10 feet tall, which is at least 100,000 years ago. They were actually the earlier ancestors of the Denisovans in Siberia, who we know were taller because they had teeth that were much larger than ours, finger bones that were much larger. They date to at least 40,000 years old, but there's some evidence now going back over 100,000 years. We know there's Denisovan DNA in North America, so we know they could have made their way to North America over the Pacific, and that could have been where the giants came from. This is something we must credit Andrew Collins. He was the first person to put this idea that Denisovans might be related to North America, and we now know they are. There is DNA in North America, in the Native American, very small amount in Native American cultures. And so we think that was one aspect of where this giant size came from for humans. But we found evidence in various different places of different migrations coming into America of extremely tall people. The Paracues from Mexico and Baja California, with the Patagonian giants on the southern tip of South America, going into Antarctica, and so on and so forth. We have European influences as well. We have people from the Great Lakes. We know were taller. We know they were a growing population. Literally, they grew in height by 1 inch every 1,000 years, also every 100 years, I think. And we know they had double rows of teeth. So there's lots of influences here. There's also, we must consider it the other way round, of like influence. Actually, there was an origin point of humans in North America or in the Americas, and that actually came out of America and went the other way. And this is something we look at quite carefully because of the creation myths and the native stories. This is what they say, and we believe there's a lot of truth in them. So that's my quick take on it. But Jim might have something.
Yeah, I was just say, were the different atmospheric conditions, look at the dinosaurs, look at 600-pound beavers where I live out here 10,000 years ago. You have different theoretical realities like Immanuel Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, where there was catastrophic events that happened in the heavens. The work of David Talbot in comparative mythology, basically showing petroglyph sites, showing plasma discharges all around the planet. Like, our past is shrouded in mystery and catastrophism, not the uniformitarianism model that modern geologists would have us think. I really think there's a different catastrophic and strange history that we have. And yeah, if the atmospheric conditions are different, who knows? I myself read a report by Ross Hamilton posted something about the paleochronology group like a week or two ago. There were a bunch of creationists, I believe, who had dinosaur bones tested, like 10 different sets of them over the last couple of years. And they keep coming back with dates of like 20 and 30,000 years old. And they've never tested in the past because carbon dating doesn't go past like 50,000 years. So for whatever reason, maybe the impetus was to prove something to justify their religious beliefs or whatever. I certainly don't think the Earth is whatever 4,000 years old. But then I found myself just so freaked out with the concept of even like, what if, there was dinosaur activity that's, and then I would go through all the arguments, it couldn't because of that, citing this study, talking about this reality, instead of just looking at the evidence and letting it dictate what we're talking about here. And maybe there were dinosaurs 20 or 30,000 years ago. Edgar Casey seems to think so in the United States. And it sounds so freaky, but I just said, hey, you're just being closed-minded because of whatever. Like, your beliefs don't line up with these people. Or it's like, that's not the way science works. You look at the evidence and you reach a consensus. You don't have a preconceived notion. And who knows what we're going to learn in the future. But we, like I said, once again, try to meet in the middle and just, not be obnoxious know-it-all. Just like, I'm open. Science is going to solve this story once and for all, that's for sure. But what we think science is another matter, which I'll quickly say. Quantum physics tells us a completely different version of reality where we kind of are collectively sharing a holographic brain that is creating reality on the fly. And I think we're collectively out to lunch, if you will. But we are learning more and more. So enough with the I know it all horseshit attitude that so many people have. How about let's just cautiously proceed and be open-minded, and that's the way science should work.
Absolutely, proving something by the facts, which is what science is all about. And
Yes.
This, whatever we want to call it, is it something that's been shut down in the present Homo sapiens sapiens? Because what I've always been thinking about is the way that people are so sheep-like in the way they respond to things, and the acceptance to be ruled and governed by tyrants, basically. I've always found that there's something within the DNA that I think shut off. We've been shut off from a higher reality at some point. That sounds a little bit cosmic, but at certain moments, we're able to open up these gateways again.
Mm.
And
Correct. Yes.
I think that, it does look as though these people kind of intrinsically knew this stuff. It would appear that it's very possible that they were more advanced. And if you want any proof that there was advanced civilizations in ancient history, look at how we've devolved. For instance, if you want to see how we've devolved, look at Saturday night television, for instance. You know what I mean? Do you really think that people, these ancient people will be wasting their time on trivia like this that people are obsessed with? This is something that is kind of quite present in my mind a lot of time when I look at this stuff.
I agree with you, actually. One of the things that the ancient people, the thing they would look at the most was the sky and the landscape. That's all they were going to look at, really. And maybe, ladies as well, whatever. But that's it. I mean, so they didn't have that distraction. So they would have time to contemplate, tune in, and gaze into the sky, and have this whole different mindset of and I think it'd be quite a kind of pure. It could be quite boring at times, but quite a pure existence of just being 100% present, and that kind of stimulates the brain. And I think they were all developing shamanic practices, and they were all kind of taking various psychotropic plant medicines as well to enhance things. And there's nothing wrong with that. We know, for instance, that many of the graves of giants, there's evidence that they were smoking something. There's very large pipes, thousands of pipes we found in the mouths and the hands of the giant skeletons. Probably tobacco, but who knows? It could have been something else. But so even just tobacco, which is slightly mind-altering in some ways, was revered. So that they were obviously into different plant medicines. And I think we've lost, something that Graham Hancock, we mentioned before, talks about, is that we've lost touch with that. We've lost touch with that part of nature, that part of gazing at the sky, that part of, just ingesting plant medicines and just, being open like that to, possibilities. And I think that, the visionary mind is something that maybe the giants were part of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because the whole point of society today is compartmentalisation of minds, especially the education system. Like, kids are now being educated with untruths and no real history, and there's no real insight into what happened in the past. There's actually no reference for anything. So references are being removed from the record.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, it's worrying, just to say the least. And you know, I'm a very strong believer in things like Steiner schools, homeschooling, that kind of thing. I think it's very important. You know, because there's so much knowledge available now. There's also a lot of bullshit, especially with the internet. But there's so much actual knowledge available, and that can be taught. It is really worrying. I agree.
But on the other hand, we've got people now who are delving properly into free energy. I've seen these things working. So there is a part of humanity that is trying to wake up, and that includes you two guys. So thanks very much for being on the show. Really fascinating, and I would recommend this book to anybody because it's such a good compilation, and it's an easy read as well. It's a very easy read.
Yeah, it's for everybody. It's for everybody. Oh, here's Linus.
Oh, Whiteout
is our friend Linus. He's been supporting us throughout the book process. Oh.
Well, he's been remarkably good, but he has made an appearance at the end, which is great.
Thanks a lot for having us on, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. That was brilliant. That's Hugh Newman and Jim Vierra, and their new book, Giants on Record, is available from where?
You can get it from Amazon. Any Amazon you can get it. You can get it through facebook.com/Giants on Record. And any bookshops in Glastonbury. There's some bookshops are having it. So we have a Kindle version, hardback, softback, and people can go to megalithomania.co.uk and get it there as well. So yeah, just Google Giants on Record, you'll find it. And if people want to get in touch with us, they can just through megalithomania.co.uk or Facebook Giants on Record.
Thanks a lot, Hugh. That's Megalithomania. When's the next one?
Megalithomania, the next one is on the 7th and 8th of May, 2016 in Glastonbury. We have a whole bunch of very interesting speakers coming along. Again, all the information is on the website. And Jim is actually joining us in South America, in Peru and Bolivia, next November, to do a tour with Brian Forrest down there, looking at, and we've actually got some leads on some giant skeletons down there. So we're looking at that as we're now researching our next book, looking at international giant discoveries.
I spoke to Brian a few weeks ago. So, Jim, where can we find you on the internet?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
I'll tell a quick story. I just, I'm kind of a black and white guy, and I do, like, when I'm not doing stonework, I'm doing stonework. Like, I'm rebuilding all the walls, the old colonial walls up and over my hill, and building stone towers in the woods. And I just like being out in nature when I have spare time. And I just found that always being on the computer was draining my life force. So I can be reached through. I check in on the Search for the Lost Giants page on Facebook, but I don't have an account anymore. And so I'm a Luddite. I'm like an old timer.
Yeah.
But
I will forward things to Jim.
Yes,
that's all right. So that's a very good place to leave it, and probably a very healthy thing because we're all sitting in front of computers too much. So yeah, let's get out more. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for being on Windows on the World.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Cool.
That was great. That was Jim Vierra and Hugh Newman, who I interviewed the other night for this show on People's Internet Radio, which I'm very, very glad to be a part of. I'd just like to point you to a few links here. If you go to windowsontheworld.net, you can see all the stuff that we did in Paris at the Paris Climate Challenge, where we actually challenged the COP21 consensus garbage that the UN are putting out. And there's real scientists there who actually used to contribute to a lot of these IPCC papers. And it's very, very interesting. This Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, it's been rebranded. I've been working on a lot, and I have very, very good information I'm going to put out in the next few weeks. But if you look at an article on there called Big Society Change Agents and some of the stuff from the Paris Climate Challenge, it's very, very useful information that we all need to get out there, because our society is being re-engineered, and this is what we need to fight against now. But as far as tonight goes, we had vaccination and giants. In future, we're going to cover the rhesus negative and the mysterious Paracas people again with Brian Forster. I spoke to Brian recently, and there's some very interesting findings on who the Paracas people were. Just look that up, that's interesting. But it's brilliant to be part of this. On Twitter at Mark Windows, Windows on the World on YouTube, and there's a great archive out there. I'd just like to thank everybody for listening, and next week we're going to have an even more interesting show. So thanks a lot, and keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. Thanks to People's Internet Radio. See you soon.